Callie Finn, thank you so much for continuing this conversation with me. If you guys are just seeing this for the first time, we talked about the top of the league, all the teams right now that have winning records. So you should go check that out and see where things stand, reacted to some power rankings. But now we have to talk about the other teams in the league because, Callie, there are only right now 5 teams in the WNBA with winning records, and the rest of the league are below 500. And so we're going to start at the top with the Indiana Fever because I don't think that's a team that anyone ever expected to even be in this situation. And look, it is, I want to say, a large part due to the fact that they are right now playing without their franchise star, Caitlin Clark, right? Yes. And this is the first time in her career that she's had to actually miss games. So this is a really, big deal. But they have to manage her quadriceps injury, her strain correctly. And so it's definitely for the best that they're doing this now. And they should not rush her back, and they are taking the precautions. But it's just, wow, you're seeing how much it impacts, the Indiana Fever. And I want to say this because it's not just Caitlin Clark who they've lost. They also, they were without Sophie Cunningham, got her back, and then she went out again with injury. Their backup point guard, Sid Colson, they just lost to injury. Their guard rotation is very, very thin right now. And you know this from last year with covering the Las Vegas Aces. You can try to move like your 2 guard or someone over to the 1, but when people start playing out of position, it disrupts the entirety of the team. You want to keep Kelsey Mitchell at the 2 and have like someone who's used to playing the point be in that 1 spot. And so they just signed Ari McDonald to a hardship contract. Yes. And so I assume she's going to be playing right away. And they still have 2 more games before it's even possible Caitlin Clark will be returning. One is against the Mystics, I believe, and the other, I forget the other.
Chicago.
Chicago. There you go.
Chicago Sky.
So, I mean, to me, those are 2 teams that they could potentially still win against without having Caitlin Clark. And so they're in a precarious situation, Callie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think even like, you mentioned Sophie Cunningham, Sid Colson, and Caitlin Clark, like those are maybe like the main injuries that we're focused on. But even like Kelsey Mitchell, that finger thing she's got going on, like she injured her finger overseas in China, like that's clearly impacting her play. Like I think maybe you would have expected her to be a little bit more impactful at this point, especially given Caitlin Clark's absence. But that's not lost on me. Like I don't imagine that she's just, at her best right now. So I think that that's one thing as well. I also think I expected DeWanna Bonner to be like incorporated differently. Like the way that she's being utilized, I'm not sure that's like what I was expecting. And I mean, I don't know. I would ask you, like, what is maybe your perspective of the way that that she's come in and kind of impacted the team? But I think I was expecting something a little bit different there. And so overall, I would agree with you. It's kind of like you don't want to dig yourself in a hole early in the season. This is a team that we started with championship expectations, right? Like after that free agency haul that they were able to pull, we were like, this is a really good, this is a good team. And you even heard players from the team talking about championship expectations. So if that's the goal, we're in kind of a crucial time right now. It's critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously the veteran experience of DeWanna Bonner is coming in very helpful right now while these players are out. She was huge in their last game. And, I want to make clear that they almost had a chance to win. It just didn't go that way. And they're dealing in game with injuries occurring like in the game. So that's a lot to manage. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm not really sure what the plan is for DeWanna Bonner. It may be better that she is coming off the bench to help the team. It seems like that's worked a little better. But I think the usage or what's needed from her is probably a more limited role than what was needed. So I think she probably, like in Connecticut, for example. So I think she just has to adjust to it. You bring up a fair point because even before Caitlin Clark's injury, the Fever were 2-2. So they were 500. So they didn't like come out the gates like, 4-0 and just, I think the Liberty game was like a good litmus test for them, which was a close game, but the Liberty still clearly looked like the better team on the floor, and so I think the biggest thing they have to try to do is just try not to lose too many games, right? Because you don't want to be in a position, because I think they'll recover fine, and I think that they'll still make the playoffs, assuming Caitlin doesn't miss too many games, and also just like teams after losing a player that's that impactful, they adjust and learn how to play. But if you fall too far in the standings and now you creep in as like a 7 or 8, you're looking at potentially facing a team like the Liberty or the Lynx first. And I don't think you want to do that in the first round, right? And so they have to find a way to try to win like these next 2 games, because let me not say very, because I'm not trying to disrespect any of their teams, but they had a schedule that was sort of soft. It was spread out for these 2 weeks that we know Caitlin Clark's going to be out. And it was all teams that they can beat. Doesn't mean they would, but they can. They've already lost 2. I think trying to win the next 2 and having like a 2-2 split is like a really good outcome for them. You know, if they only win 1 out of these 4 games or don't win any of them, that would not be great for the Fever, because now you're talking about, you're already 2 games below 500. So now you're talking about being even further below 500, which would be, now you're like, you know, it's an uphill battle, and you don't want Caitlin Clark to feel pressure to have to rush back. You want her to really be back when she's back, and so that way you guys can go do what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I respect about Stephanie White is it seems like she is firm about like the kind of injury protocol. Like you heard, like wasn't Sophie Cunningham trying to push she had like an early season injury that she was kind of trying to push to play through, and their coach was like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not doing that. So I would think that, you know, Caitlin Clark seems like somebody who is like, I want to be on the court right now, you know? And so
she's arguing with refs even while she's not playing.
Yes, exactly. And I think it probably takes a lot of like willpower as a coach to kind of deny a star like with the caliber of Caitlin Clark and be like, no, sit down somewhere. So I hope, you know, that like pays off for the Fever, and that it's like, they're managing it, you know, to the point where when she comes back, it's seamless and all those other things. Because like you said, you definitely don't want her to feel rushed. That's not the outcome that anybody wants.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're like just talking about many of the teams around the league. And I would say, you know, I did some power rankings, you know, this week, as you know, we discussed them earlier. But like the Seattle Storm, they're a team that I put this week at like number 6. I think a lot of people were high on the Seattle Storm coming into this season. And I think when they beat the Aces and like this really, you know, big blowout win, people were like, oh man, yeah, see. And it's a funny thing with the Aces, Callie, right? Because I feel like the Aces are actually judged more harshly. Like they're judged against themselves. So like even though they controlled the game against Seattle yesterday for 3 quarters, right? Like most good teams can do, like the Seattle Storm went on a run. And so Vegas is still getting a lot of flack for that 4th quarter, you know, and it's just like, I understand that, but if this was like, we're praising the Atlanta Dream for coming back in a 17-point victory, right? So it's like, I feel like the Aces can't win because they're like, people are judging them like they're at the level of the Liberty already, but they have a new team. And so when you think about a team like the Storm, right, I feel like they got a big boost because they beat the Aces, but I'm like, which version of the Aces did they beat? They're getting credit for beating the back-to-back champion Aces, but those aren't the Aces that they really played. So I bring that up to say that I didn't really overvalue that win when they got it, because I feel like Seattle has played a lot of games where they've gotten down, they've had to come back. Their defense is excellent, but they still have offensive struggles. So like I said, them at 6 for me is not that shocking. And I wouldn't be surprised if they finish the season like somewhere around a 6 or a 7 seed, to be honest. That I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them. And look, there's a lot of promise with Malonga. You have Nneka Ogwumike and Skylar Diggins leading your team, but I just, their offense is sometimes hard for them to come by. And I mean, Gabby Williams has been great. Obviously, her 3-point shot has improved a lot. So they might just be another team that needs more time to put together. But is there anything surprising to you about the Storm? And then after, I just want you to let me know if there are any other teams left that like surprise you.
Yeah, I think with the Storm, it's funny. I don't know if it was this show that I said it on or a different one, but I was saying like to me the Storm are like a sneaky championship contender. This was before the season began, but like just based on their roster, I was like, like this is a really interesting front court, and obviously like Skylar Diggins, all this like the Skylar Diggins, Nneka Ogwumike pick and roll, like that's gonna be lethal, and we saw that it was against the Aces, but um in terms of like what you're saying, you're bringing up a really good point, which is like evaluating the Storm. And obviously their strongest win is against the Aces, and the Aces are an interesting team when it comes to like how to judge I don't know, like a matchup like that. And so for me, I think that I evaluated this most recent matchup between the Storm and Aces as the Storm are still a really good team. The Aces just got figured a couple things out. And I think what you saw in the fourth quarter is the Storm adjusted as a good team should, right? They adjusted really well to what the Aces were doing defensively, offensively, like just in, like they did what they were supposed to do, right? And so I don't think that's like necessarily a knock on the Aces. In some ways it is, because it's like you need to control the game. If you had a 17-point lead entering the fourth quarter, then you shouldn't be, looking at losing the game in the final 30 seconds, right? However, that to me is impressive for the Storm. And it's difficult because they're on a 3-game losing streak. And like, I don't know what you do with that, but these are strong teams, right? Like the first game that their losing streak was the Minnesota Lynx. And we were just talking about how the Atlanta Dream is like sneakily good. You know what I mean? So I'm not ready to like count the Storm out, but in terms of like power rankings, I'd probably have them in the same place as you do. But I think that, they just, the potential that the Storm has is so intriguing to me. And like, I'm definitely not counting them out.
Okay. Well, there are no more winless teams in the WNBA. The Chicago Sky got their first win against the Dallas Wings. The Dallas Wings actually got their first win against the Connecticut Sun, and the Sun got their first win against the Fever. So no more winless teams, but I think of those winless teams that were there, some people were higher on Chicago. I always sort of had them as a fringe playoff team. And I also have the Wings as a fringe playoff team if they could figure things out. They're right now without Paige Beckers. So honestly, these teams sort of struggling in the beginning, it's not a surprise to me. I think it may be a surprise too, because I think they are figuring things out. And Tyler, we had him on, to speak with us. I trust Tyler, but it's going to take time for some of these other teams to figure out, what they're doing. So, but I do want to say the Valkyries, I think, shout out to them, first of all, for having 3 games, their 3 home games be sellouts over 18,000 plus. That is so dope. People tend to think that these teams can't fill arenas. But they are, and they're doing that. That is the same arena that the Warriors play in, and they are playing there, and they are filling it up. And they are like, for the most part, aside of that one, I think, not one, but like their opening night game, I think, and then to the Liberty, they kind of got blown out. But they've been competitive in every game. Their defense is very good. I think that's all you can ask for from an expansion franchise. Like, I don't actually expect them to win many games, because at the end of the game, when it's time to close, most of these other teams have like go-to stars, and they don't necessarily have that on this team. They have some very, very, very good players. Is Tip their go-to closer? Like, I don't know on the team. I think it's going to vary from night to night. And so, but I think what they're doing, they're getting their fans excited, they're getting their crowd excited, and they're making games competitive. And I think that's all you can ask for with an expansion team.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about their go-to player. Tiffany Hayes is making me nervous. She did the same thing with the Aces, though. She's a very physical player, right? So she's on the floor sacrificing her body, and I'm like, you're not a spring chicken anymore. Are you gonna be okay? Type thing. And same thing with like these past few games. Every time I look up, she's like exiting a game due to some type of injury. So like that makes me nervous, I think, a little bit for the Valkyries. But seeing that like shape up will be really interesting. Because even Kate Martin has had some really strong games. Like their most recent one, what she had like 14 points, something like that, which is like solid, for this is only her second year in the league. So interesting. They're an interesting team. But I mean, like you were saying, none of these teams that we're listing that kind of holding up the bottom of the rankings are like a surprise to me. Like we've discussed all the surprises. Everything else is like, this all makes sense. This is what you would expect from these teams, given, just that they're new and adjusting to all these different things.
What about give me your thoughts on the Los Angeles Sparks? Their big signing was Kelsey Plum, a player that you're familiar with from the Aces. They're also not a surprise to me, but there were a lot of people who were like, yeah, like Kelsey's getting her own team. She won her own team. And I think Kelsey Plum is a great player, but I still just thought that the Sparks were probably still lacking some pieces. And then you're still talking about trying to do it with some players who are very young. Rickea Jackson, who right now is out for personal reasons. She was out before for concussion protocol. Yeah. Cam Brink isn't back yet, but then I think she is going to come back at some point this season. You'll have to deal with like working her in. Plus there's just a lot of new pieces. So I kind of also expected them to be a fringe playoff team. So where they are right now isn't surprising to me, but any thoughts on the Sparks?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to touch on one thing you mentioned with like this whole like face of the franchise thing with Kelsey Plum, because she talked about it when they came to Las Vegas, and she was like, I don't know where that comes from. Like, I didn't come to this team to be the face of anything. Like, that's not what I wanted to do. Like I just wanted a fresh start, et cetera, et cetera. But I would agree with you that she's been kind of thrust into that position, the way that they presented her and things like that. All those things and the way they're utilizing her, they point to face of the franchise. She's a two-time WNBA champion. Right. So that aside, one thing to me, I mean, this is like really basic, like 101, but it's like they have a brand new coach, and like that's one thing. A new coach is going to be in an adjustment period, and you can have a new coach that just starts and has an incredible run. But Lynn Roberts is like brand new to the WNBA, like as overall. Not that she wasn't watching and all that stuff, and she mentioned she was a basketball junkie and was watching the league, but a lot of her staff too are like from the Pac-12. I think this is an adjustment period for them. And so, no, I'm not surprised by the way that they look. And I think, too, even for Kelsey, the adjustment to being like the number one option, that means that you're going to be guarded differently. Like the Aces, they were like, this is not personal, but we're going to guard her different. She was the second leading scorer in the league.
But you. Anybody but Kelsey.
That matchup. Right. So it's like, we're going to guard you differently. Like we would do the same thing for Caitlin Clark. We would do the same thing. Like that was what Becky Hammon said. Like that's how they're going to treat Kelsey, and that's a big adjustment. So I think that that's kind of what you're seeing. Like, it's just a lot of adjusting happening with the Sparks. So I'm with you. It's kind of like, well, what did we expect? Like all the Kelsey adjustment period, and even like with Rickea, that's something really separate that I'm interested to learn more about. Like what is going on there? And then with Cameron Brink too, I'm like, what's her timeline? Because that is going to be. She's a huge addition to that team, like in terms of what they can do defensively and things like that. So it's just going to be like a lot of question marks surrounding them, just like with a lot of these other kind of like developing, gelling, rebuilding teams.
Well, there you have it. Around the WNBA with Callie, Finn, and me. Callie, so much. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a great discussion. Everybody, make sure you were tuned into the W. Check out my power rankings. They're coming out later today, and games are back tomorrow for the WNBA.
Woo! This was fun, Nat. This was so fun.
Take care, y'all.